All right, good morning everyone and welcome to another of the Teaching Academy's PD series for 2026. We're getting very close to the end of the series and today we have a session from the Division of Library Services team with Beck Fabry, Catherine Crithar and Lorraine Rose in the room. Apologies if I've pronounced any of those names incorrectly. But they are running a session this morning on exploring AI research and discovery tools for teaching and research. As always, the session will be recorded. Any artifacts associated with the session will be provided to you after the event itself. And there'll be sort of comms that will let you know once they're all available, etc., once we wrap. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Beck and team. Enjoy the session.
Thanks, Lachlan, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming along to our workshop today on exploring AI research and discovery tools. My name's Beck Fabry, and I look after the learning and teaching support provided by the library, and I'm joined today by my colleagues and co-presenters, faculty librarians Catherine Crithar and Lorraine Rose. First up, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the lands on which we live and work together. And I'd like to pay my respects to elders within First Nations communities and acknowledge the continuity of cultures, languages, leadership, and knowledge systems. So in today's workshop, we're going to explore AI research and discovery tools from a couple of different connected perspectives. Firstly, we're going to really briefly look at how the library supports students to use AI responsibly, including some of the key messages from our Using AI at Uni online workshop for students and related online resources. We'll then take a closer look at the Primo AI Research Assistant, ProQuest Research Assistant, and Consensus as well. And we'll look at how these tools can be used to explore scholarly literature. And you'll also have an opportunity to try out Primo AI Research Assistant and Consensus in a short activity at the end of the workshop. So just to get us started, just wanted to get a quick sense of the room, just to see how many of you, or if any of you, have already used AI-powered tools to search for scholarly information. So if you're happy to share, if you can just pop your answers in the chat, that'd be great. And if you have used an AI-powered tool to search for scholarly information, which ones have you used, or which ones have you had a look at? Okay, there's a bit of a mix there. That's really good to see. Some who have, some who have dabbled. Failed badly with Consensus. Oh, well, today's session hopefully will be helpful for you, Lachlan, because we are going into Consensus. Yeah, a few people trying different tools. Great. Illicit Research Rabbit or Trudy, you're onto it. That's great to see. So thank you everyone for sharing. If you are new to tools like these, we do hope that today's session provides a useful introduction and starting point for you. And if you've used them before, we hope that you'll still pick up some helpful tips and discover something new. All right. So to get started, firstly, what are we teaching students about responsible AI use? So one of our aims in the library is to give students some practical principles that they can apply regardless of which AI tool they are using or considering using. We remind students that appropriate AI use depends on their subject and the particular task, and that they need to check the guidance provided by their teaching staff. We also talk about privacy and copyright, particularly around being careful about putting personal information, subject materials, or licensed library resources into external AI tools. And we emphasize that AI should support rather than replace their learning, and that AI-generated information always needs to be checked. And finally, where AI use is permitted, we reinforce that students need to follow their subject requirements for declaring or acknowledging that use. We also give students a simple yes, check first or no framework to help them decide whether and how to use AI in their studies. So a yes might be using AI to explain a concept or create revision questions, activities that would support their learning. Check first applies when the appropriate use of AI depends on the particular subject or assessment task. And a no includes using AI when it's prohibited or not allowed in this subject, or using it to replace work that the student is expected to do themselves. We also encourage students to come back to 3 questions. Is it helping them learn? Is it allowed for their task? And can they be transparent about how they've used it? And we also encourage all users, including students, to always check AI-generated information and trace claims back to reliable evidence. Students, and to be honest, all of us, will increasingly encounter AI-generated summaries, answers, and recommendations, not only in general purpose tools like Copilot or ChatGPT, but also within search engines, databases, or other research tools. So understanding what checking AI-generated information looks like in practice is a really important skill. So when an AI tool makes a claim, what we do is encourage a simple process. So don't take the claim or any references that are provided at face value. Instead, identify the key idea or key ideas, search for relevant scholarly evidence, follow that evidence back to the original sources, and judge whether those sources actually support that claim. And this is really an extension of traditional information literacy skills, which are searching for information, evaluating sources, interpreting evidence, and making informed judgments. All right, so next up, we're going to look at how that process works in some AI-supported library tools. So today we're starting with the Primo AI Research Assistant. And this is one of the tools we introduce to students, but it's available to everyone, students and staff. It's designed specifically for scholarly discovery rather than general purpose chat. So how it works is you ask a question in natural language, and it does generally need to be phrased as a question, a research question. And what happens then behind the scenes is that your question is converted into a search query, which is run against the Primo Central Discovery Index. And this is an index of more than 5 billion records from scholarly and other academic sources. It reviews the most relevant search results and then selects 5 sources that it believes best address your question, and then uses their abstracts to generate a short overview with inline references linking back to the source records. Because the overview is generated from retrieved records using a technique which is known as retrieval augmented generation, or RAG, that means it's grounded in real traceable scholarly content rather than relying on the AI's general knowledge. However, it is still based on a small selection of results, so we treat this as a starting point, not a substitute for a comprehensive search or for critically evaluating the sources and the AI-generated overview. And then we're going to take a look at ProQuest Research Assistant as well. So ProQuest works a little bit differently. Its main document analysis features appear once you open a full text article, and those features are then grounded in that document. And what it can do is generate a plain language key takeaway, identify and explain important concepts, summarize the findings and conclusions, and suggest related topics to explore next through its brainstorming feature. Some of the features, including the findings and conclusions, link to supporting passages within the article, which makes it easier to check the AI-generated summary against that original text. And we're showing both of these tools or features today because they demonstrate 2 different ways AI can support the discovery of scholarly literature or information. So Primo searches across multiple sources and generates an overview of a topic, while ProQuest helps you examine and understand an individual source in more detail. And just a note, we are seeing more and more of these AI features appearing in library databases. So we are sort of compiling some information about where those features appear and how they act and behave. And that information is available in our Gen AI library guide. And we'll pop a link into the specific page in the chat in just a moment. All right. So I'm going to stop sharing now, and I will hand over to Catherine, who's going to take us through a demonstration of the Primo AI Research Assistant and the ProQuest Research Assistant as well. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you, Beck. Just share my screen. On screen now, you should have Primo search page. Yes. Excellent. Now, I'll just turn my camera off for a moment. Now, the Research Assistant tab you'll find on this top toolbar, and we'll just go straight through to there. Now, before I place the question in the search bar, I would just like to point out the privacy and disclaimer information. So we'll have a quick look at that. Now it explains the use of large language models, which is good because we often get questions on that. And part of that conversation is Clarivate does not use any of your data to directly or indirectly train LLMs. Now, of course, there's more information there for you to read, and the privacy and data protection information as well. But we'll go back to our Primo Research Assistant. Now, imagine an AI tool has suggested that climate change can have significant impacts on agriculture and fisheries in coastal communities. Now, rather than accepting that statement, let's look for scholarly evidence. So we would, to our question, into the research bar, and a detailed question is good to search. So we just search here. You can see what Beck was speaking about. The 5 most relevant resources will show on our screen shortly. So this is what it looks like. The 5 most relevant resources retrieved. And sorry, I'll just move this for me. And you can select this related results, and it'll take you through to Primo where you can refine and explore further results. The overview of the sources is in the center of the page, and each paragraph relates and is supported here, cited for the relevant articles that are on display. Now, you can also scroll down a little further and select related questions. So if you select this related question, it'll go into the search bar and you can continue the search on your initial topic. It will provide a string of information on this page, so you could scroll back up to your initial search. The important thing is not to stop here. Find a source isn't the same as verifying a claim. We need to open the original research, read it, and decide whether the evidence actually supports what is said. So this is a good starting place. If students wanted to create another question, they would go and select new topic. So we're going to explore this article today. Potential impacts of climate change on agriculture and fishery production in 72 tropical coastal communities. So I'll select this and it'll give me some options. I could download the PDF to read it. I can go straight through to the online text, which we will today. Now, this takes us straight through to ProQuest. I'm just moving this around the screen. So you'll see it's very clearly displayed. You've got the whole article to read on the screen, the PDF to download, the abstract, and the AI Research Assistant is in the panel on the right of the screen. It offers key takeaway insights. You can scroll down. You can select a quick look at other related information. The visualized topics is always an interesting one, and we'll have a look at that. So it maps, gives a great visual map of other related topics. And the summary information that comes with this article for students to peruse first before they may choose to read the article further can be translated into a language more familiar and then read and just converted back to English. And that's a very quick process, and I'm sure would be quite helpful to many students. The important concepts, students can copy this information. It's quite user-friendly and a helpful tool to guide students in deciding whether to move forward and read the full article. Were there any questions with that, Beck? Or
I don't think so, Catherine. I mean, I think Lachlan did ask a question about how those results are ranked. And I'm looking for specific information. You can, if you have a look at the Primo AI Research Assistant, when you run that natural language search, you can actually go back into Primo and you can see the search that's been created. So the AI is working to create sort of a Boolean search from your original research question and then runs that Boolean search within Primo itself.
Here, and the AI, generative AI at university has a nice section here on our ProQuest information as well.
Yeah, I think it is using AI to rank the results as well.
Yes.
And I think it does learn from thumbs up, thumbs down in the searches as well. It's not always perfect, of course, like anything. And, you know, we always encourage users to, you know, look at the results. If you don't see anything that's relevant, the search can be run again, or you can try a different search, or go back into Primo and run a traditional search.
It's interesting the various kind of avenues that you can take with the research assistant in terms of how it's sort of collating or organizing some of that information, etc. But I guess where my head's going with that is what type of activity am I kind of wanting to see from students in terms of what they do with that information as a part of the, I guess, the submission process in a sense, and because it's quite sophisticated, there's a bunch of different things, but to some extent I'm already jumping to, well, if I paraphrase some of that in my own language, then job done. But that's not validation, that's not discernment, that's not, you know, kind of critiquing what's there. It's simply kind of trying to game the information you've been given and saying, well, that is my own language, and it's, you know, this thing's already got a whole stack of other references that I can drop in there as well. And you know, so I where do you go with that kind of that mentality, which I think you probably find is not a one-off, Yeah, shortcuts, absolutely, Nikki.
I guess it's the
Yeah.
critical thinking that you need to emphasize, you know, and perhaps it's comparing the results you get from that research assistant search with a search that you run using traditional search techniques within the standard, you know, basic or advanced search within Primo, comparing those results, searching, going back to the sources, identifying whether the perhaps the summary that was provided by the AI research assistant was accurate, and if not, why is it not accurate? What has been missed by the tool? Those are
So
things that just
it's
come to mind.
research on the research.
Mm.
Anyway, I think we could probably have a whole other workshop on going down that rabbit hole, so I won't railroad you anymore.
Thank you. I'll stop sharing.
All right, and it is my turn now to start sharing, and we're going to jump into another AI research tool. So you should be seeing Consensus up on the screen now. Great, I'm getting a few nods. So I guess Primo gives us a relatively accessible entry point for students because it's linked into Primo Search, and it is particularly useful in our student support context. But now we want to just show you another tool that may also be useful, and I know some of you have used this tool, which is great, and maybe this will be a useful tool in teaching and in research. Consensus. So it is an AI supported academic search tool, and it's designed specifically around research literature. It can help you explore a research question, identify potentially relevant papers, and get an initial sense of what the literature might be saying. This can make it useful for that preliminary exploration, for example, when you're looking into an unfamiliar teaching and learning question or beginning to explore a social topic. The reason we are showing you Consensus today because there's a plethora of AI-powered search tools, and I saw some mentioned today, Research Rabbit, Elicit, but Consensus is a really good one because we can link it to CSU Library. Which is, I think, helpful to stop hitting those paywalls. So a little bit of a tour around Consensus. Now, I am in the free version of Consensus. I've created an account, I'm logged in, and in the bottom left corner, I can see my name. And if I click on that and then go into the settings, this is where I'm going to set it up to make sure I'm linked to Charles Sturt University. And so here under University or Institution Preferences, I've put Charles Sturt. So that's a good thing to do. Now, the other thing in the bottom left corner is there's a Learn link, and this can take you out. And I'm a big fan of always saying, investigate these products you're using. So look at the privacy policies of them, look at the help sections. So what I'm really interested in Consensus is, where is my information that I'm putting into it going to be used to train the data, train the model in the future? So Consensus says no to this, so that's good news. My other thing that I'm interested in, and this is all in the frequently asked questions when you go into the Learn section of Consensus, but where does Consensus search? Where is its data source? And it is using some really big, good quality academic databases, Semantic Scholar and OpenAlex. So that's good. I know that my sources that I'm going to get once I start asking a question are coming from good quality databases. And just like we knew with Primo, we knew the data source of all those articles too. So I think that's really important when we're using any of these AI tools to understand what the data source is for them. Now, let's ask a question. Let's see how it works. So I'm going back to the home screen, and just like Primo Research Assistant, there's very much these tools like a natural language question. So we want to ask a question to the tool. What helps university students critically evaluate Gen AI outputs? And we'll set that up to start researching. Now, I did have a couple of options before I hit search. One is this corpus option I could have selected, and this is where you can actually choose where you want it to search. Do you want it to search over the 220 million research papers everywhere, or do you want to just limit it to medical papers, medical databases? You can also do this deep search. So with the normal search that I did, I get, I think, 15 free a month. The deep search only gets 3. And it is just a deeper literature review. It's really good. It takes a bit longer to generate the answer, so I won't use it today. And I also don't want to use up one of my 3 that I get. But that's worth having a play around with too, because you get a much bigger synthesis and literature review at the end. Now we've got our question here and it's answered it. So what it has done in the middle section, it has developed a synthesis of the articles that it's found. This is a useful orientation to the topic, but again, we don't want to treat it as the conclusion of our research. We should be interested in what lies underneath this answer. How many studies were actually relevant? What type of studies are they? How are the findings consistent? Are there particular populations or contexts involved? We don't really know how it gets to how their algorithm works to get to this answer. So that's something that we have to critically think about because it has ranked articles on relevance and decided that these are the most important articles and written a synthesis about them, but it's made those decisions by some unknown algorithm. Interestingly, the other day in the library, we ran a group session where we were all trying to put the same question into this consensus, and people got different answers. So it doesn't give you the exact same question, didn't give the same answers, didn't bring up the same articles. There were slight variations. So we've got our synthesis. The nice thing about consensus is you can hover over these pinpoints and it will tell you where it gets that information from. So we can check that, fact checked. And it does go through a nice sort of summary here, gives us some different avenues to think of and develop further questions from. On the right-hand side, it lists all the sources it's used. And you'll also notice as I hover my mouse over these sources, we've got our link here with the Charles Sturt icon. And if I click that, that takes us to the PDF version of that article where we're actually accessing it through Charles Sturt. So the advantage of setting up consensus with the library is that we're not going to be hitting paywalls that we would usually hit when you use some of these AI-powered search in Google, for example, and you try to access an article and suddenly it's asking you for money. Consensus links with the library, so we're getting full text articles. When they're available through the library, they'll automatically be linked here, which is great. So that's a little bit about consensus. Oh, the other thing I just wanted to mention is we can filter these articles as well. So if I click on the filter, I can choose, say, to publish, just to filter by articles in the last 5 years, and then it will change the synthesis to only using articles in the last 5 years. You can also include which type of journals you want. So maybe we only want Q1 journals. So there's a few different filters there, countries as well, for example, so we can filter that search. So quite a good little tool to be able to generate a bit of a summary of your question, but then lead you to some articles that then you can, what we're trying to encourage students to do is to actually then go in and read those articles. If we were undertaking a comprehensive literature review or a systematic style search, we'd still need an appropriate database search and research methodology. This AI tool isn't a substitute for that process, but it is just really helpful at that exploratory stage. So maybe it helps with identifying terminology, discovering those initial papers, or just getting a preliminary sense of the body of literature that's out there. Any questions about consensus before we jump into a little activity? Cool. Right. Well, what we would like to do now is for everybody to try it themselves. And we would like you to either choose Primo Research Assistant or Consensus, or both. Maybe do a question in both of these tools. Choose a topic that you teach and then jump into one of the tool and use a question in that tool. And then look at what the tool gives you. Don't just assess whether the answer sounds good. Follow through to the underlying sources. So look at those articles that it is referencing. And now on the slide, we have some questions, and we would love you to post your responses into the chat or turn on your mic and let us know your thoughts on these tools. And Beck, Catherine and I will be sitting here ready to answer any questions. But yeah, we'd love to just know how you go with using those couple of tools. We'll pop the questions in the chat as well, so you have them there. And Beck has kindly put the links to both those tools in the chat. With Consensus, you will have to set up an account. With Primo Search, you'll have to log in. With the Research Assistant in Primo Search, you will have to log in with your Charles Sturt credentials. And I guess as a fourth question, if you have used some other tools, so Google Scholar Labs and Elicit and Research Rabbit, how do you compare them to these tools as well? Maybe if you have time, use the same question in Elicit or Google Scholar Labs and let us know what you think. I was just looking back through the chat as well, and Nikki has asked about if we did the experiment with Consensus at the same time, and it was all in the same time at the same time. And I was surprised. I thought we'd get similar answers, and I guess that's just a sign that the algorithm's working a little bit differently. Yes, Lachlan, it's not using our data. Is it using what we've searched before, though, to understand us?
Seems like an interesting nuance. Your
Yes.
usage history is not your data. Yeah, it is.
Yes.
So
Yeah, it's a really good point about the mental load for students and us as well, staff as well. We're having to learn these new tools. And the other thing I find with them is that they change weekly. I'm in them quite a lot, and quite often I'm having to figure out, well, gosh, this has changed from last time. So this is what we have to deal with, that relearn these tools every time we jump into them. It's also with our database, the AI that is now in all our databases, or in some of the databases, and that's another where students and us might go into a database to find and read an article, and then suddenly all this AI is popping up saying, do you want a summary? So it's something, again, that mental load of navigating that or trying to ignore it.
I think that's a good point. One of the good features, though, or one of the good things I think about the features that are actually within the databases and giving you the summary of the articles, is that it provides access to those features without the user having to risk copyright issues. We do know that's one of the biggest questions we get about, certainly from students, about whether I can upload this particular article to an AI tool to help me get a summary or to learn a little bit more about it. And that is risky and generally does breach copyright. So having those features available in the databases themselves does help with that, because students get access to those features that, to be honest, many people are sort of expecting to see now, without a risk to sort of copyright.
I agree, Beck. I've had, with the Primo AI Assistant, students value the overview and the links to the articles, so they know exactly where parts of that overview are related to in the articles. Very much aware that they still need to critically evaluate what they're reading and to read the full article. But the ability to start with Primo AI Assistant and that natural language question has been really quite helpful.
Yeah, it definitely helps me when I'm starting searching for a topic, because it's just seeing the phrases and the language that is used around the topic that I'm looking for information on, that sort of gives a tip on how to sort of do some further searching, which I find really helpful. Yeah, some good observations in the chat there now about consensus and the comparison.
And Lachlan has asked about verify that sources really support the claim. So when AI first came along, there was a lot of talk about hallucinations, and these were like ChatGPT and Claude making up references, and they still do it. They're very good at making up these really sophisticated references where the authors might be real authors, the journal might be a real journal, but the volume and issue number's completely wrong, and the title's just a little bit off from a similar title. So they're hallucinated references. But as well as the hallucinated references, they can also hallucinate the content. So they can summarize the content incorrectly, and it's another hallucination. And so that's where we need to read that synthesis that Consensus is putting up, or Primo Research is summarizing, and actually make sure that it is properly summarizing the articles, because it might be hallucinating those the content of the articles. Now, Primo Research Assistant and Consensus are very good at not producing hallucinated references, because we know their data source is really good. They're getting all their information, all their references from good data sources, but they still could hallucinate that content. Yes, you should read the articles. And this is what we need to educate everyone.
Yeah, I guess, and obviously I'm playing devil's advocate here to some extent, but I suppose we're looking at a feature set and going, oh, well, it's great that it organizes the information in these different ways, whether it's the summary or that extended kind of tool set and visualizations and all the rest of it. But we're also at the same time saying, well, potentially, if not distrust, you're going to need to actually move beyond that and go through them fully. And there's probably a logic underlying this. It says the reason that I'm using these to begin with potentially is so that I don't have to read through all of these. I want to get to the point where, you know, it's taking me to the things that I specifically need to use without having done, let's say, more extensive research or more comprehensive research.
It may assist a little way in that. I guess if you're looking at an AI-produced summary and there's a claim in there and that feels relevant to your topic, trace it back, look for that claim in the actual article. So it's not necessarily about, you know, word for word reading of an article. It's skimming that article, as you do often with scholarly literature, skimming that article, identifying if that claim does appear within that actual article, and then go, okay, this is relevant. I can spend a bit more time on this article. So it's identifying articles that may be worth reading, rather than you having a result list of, you know, 200, 500, 1,000. You've got perhaps a smaller result list, and you can perhaps hone in on relevant articles a little bit faster, or yeah, that would be my thinking.
Yeah, I guess to further problematize it, you know, I'm immediately going to, where is this stuff broken down in the rubric, for example, that this type of activity is explicitly required and is going to be scrutinized further by the markers, for example, you know. So again, it becomes a bit of a rabbit hole at that point, because if they're not going to be scrutinized against it, then they're not necessarily going to use the types of behaviors that we're talking about and expecting. And similarly, I haven't seen a great many rubrics that talk about these types of expectations in terms of student behavior and output in compiling or collating their responses. So you'll hear people constantly talking about, you know, evidence of critical thinking or critical thinking skills in the same conversations as talking about use of Gen AI, but you won't actually see it necessarily backed up in terms of what's being looked at in the rubric, which we're then saying to the students is where they should start looking to know what they need to actually have demonstrated or done in the task. So again, there's a whole lot in that assumption space, as opposed to, well, we expect you to use this thing in particular ways, you know, with particular sort of ethical mindsets and workflows and all the rest of it. But we don't necessarily, I absolutely what Trudy's saying. Essentially, I think we've moved well beyond. I think I saw a rubric the other day that actually mentioned use of spell check and you know, grammar checks and what have you. So there are points being allocated for things like that, which seems incredibly superficial, I suppose, in the space of the type of higher order functions and stuff that we're discussing here. So it's Anyway,
Yeah.
I don't expect you to have answers necessarily, just a comment.
Yeah, really good points, and particularly now that, these tools and these practices are fairly new. I feel like, spelling them out step by step, what does this look like in practice, would be incredibly helpful for students.
And when we know, obviously it was mentioned earlier on that when Gen AI use is permitted, are we at that point now with subject outlines, etc.? I'm sure others can weigh in if it's allowed to be used, or do we encourage it to be used as a default position unless someone specifically says you're not allowed to use it? Where have we landed on that currently? And depending on what that position is, I wonder if
That's a really
there's
good point.
a follow-on that basically says, well, if you are saying that it should be used, or we expect it to be used, or it's likely to be used, that then prompting, right, and it's made its way into the rubric, etc., and is being scrutinized to some extent in terms of how it's being used. Yes, for learning, not for assessment. Yeah, I'm still confused.
It's really complex, isn't it? And it's, I think Mark has mentioned it a few times. When do assessments start?
Yeah, so to some extent, be interesting to do an exercise, and maybe we can, Trudy and myself and others in the sort of the DLT space, we might do a bit of a fish around to see to what extent those types of criterion have made their way into rubrics around the traps. If yeah, Kristen, sorry, I'm taking all the limelight here.
No, that's good. And I think this is really interesting. So I'm AHOS of Learning Teaching in SAHES, so looking at all the subject outlines. And I feel like there's an absolute shift now where we can't just tick, no, you can't use it, which is great because I don't think that that's realistic. But then it's moving from, no, you can't use it, to how am I assessing it in a rubric? So I feel like a lot of our subject outlines have got, yes, it's allowed purely because we can't stop you and we can't see whether you're going to use it or not. And here's a suggestion of the ways in which we're allowing it to. So we might, a lot of the subject outlines have great detail about things like, you can use it to generate ideas or to clean up your wording or to, map out the project or to, create an infographic, but the content must be yours. So there's some beautiful, I guess, overarching ideas of how to support or the requirements that the students have around the Gen AI, but then you get to the rubric and it's still kind of the same rubric as it was before. So you've still got APA 7th, 3 errors only, and you get a, credit or below, nothing to do with the AI use or the generation of the AI use. There's a couple of assessment tasks that's almost built in, like, let Gen AI do it, critique what it's done, and then do your own thing. So that, I guess, is kind of working through the process of what the errors might be or how you might use it in practice. I think there's more people building it into some of the learning and some of the activities to develop skills, but still struggling to work out how it can be done in assessment. So yeah, some of the SAHES school, Lachlan, I can send you through a few subject outlines that have got the spiel about, yes, it can be used. Here's how we suggest that it's used for the task, or here's how it's permitted to be used for the task. But yeah, still kind of struggling with that connection to assessment.
Absolutely. I think it's probably one of those areas that needs fairly urgent kind of attention across the board, because it's not going away. But the other thing that occurs to me is that the moment that you include it as an expectation within rubrics, you've moved it into that space where you're saying we expect everyone to use it.
Yeah,
you'll need to have used it and used it well, or in a certain way to get those points.
And the equity that sits there of paid versions versus unpaid versions, literacy of the students in how that, and that was kind of my point before, is this digital literacy of the system that they're using and how well they use a system, but also then our digital literacy as we're learning this alongside the students to say which particular program we're wanting them to use just because that's the one I'm familiar with, therefore it makes my job easier. Yeah, it's complex.
I think a good example has been in the news lately about all the AI medical scribes and how they're getting details incorrect. And I think this is all about teaching students to check the answers of AI and know that they're not going to be accurate, and they could be hallucinations, or it could be you check these sources. So it's all back to that, digital literacy skills, AI literacy skills, learning all of those now, so that when they are going out and if they're using these kind of AI scribes, they know to check them before saying they're okay. All right, well, if that's given everybody enough time to have a bit of a play around with some of those tools, we'll just have a few more slides to finish up, and also very happy to have some more questions. So where do these tools we've shown you today fit, and where should they be used? There's no single best AI research tool. As you've seen today, if you manage to compare a couple of the tools, or if you've used some other tools as well, you'll notice they all work a little bit differently. The question we like to think of is, what am I actually trying to do? So an AI research assistant might be useful for that initial exploration, or if you're unfamiliar with the terminology around a topic. But then traditional searching gives you considerable more control and becomes increasingly more important as the search needs to be more comprehensive, transparent, or reproducible. And so regardless of the tool, the same information literacy skills remain important. Understand what you're searching, evaluate what is returned, tracing claims back to their sources, and making your own judgment about the evidence. So on this slide, we have some different tools and their potential uses. So we've got our general AI chatbot, so Copilot, this ChatGPT and Claude, great for exploring ideas, explaining concepts, generating some questions. Primo Research Assistant moves from a research question towards some scholarly sources. Then our database AI features are great for orientating yourself within an article or a set of results. Consensus can explore research literature and evidence around a question, and then that traditional Primo and database searching for more controlled, comprehensive, or complex searching. And Becca's going to pop these slides in the chat. Oh, she already has. Too quick for me, and there's lots of links to everything here as well. I did just want to quickly mention too, in our Gen AI library guide, which is on our library guides page, we do have some short videos for students and for yourselves as well on using Consensus, using Google Scholar Labs and Gemini Notebook. So these AI tools for study and research, really quick. I think they're only like 5-minute videos on each of those different AI tools there for students. And we also have an online library workshop coming up in a couple of weeks to direct students to on how to use AI responsibly at uni. So there's a recording here, but we've updated the workshop recently and we're running it in a couple of weeks. I think there'll be Beck's going to pop something in the chat about where students can go to register for that. But yeah, check out our Gen AI library guide, because we also do have the Gen AI and library databases section. So this is where we go through a little bit about where that AI is built into different databases now and how it's working. And there's also, as Beck mentioned before, always lots of questions on copyright. So we've got some really good resources here about copyright and what do we need to check before we're uploading something into an AI tool. Any questions before we finish up today?
You've obviously done too good a job here, Lorraine, Beck and Catherine. So I think just like to say a big thank you on behalf of everyone in here as well for another excellent workshop. We've been really on point today, even with timing and the slides and how comprehensive the materials are that you've put together, and triggered a whole bunch of other debate and questions and things. So all of that says a very healthy and effective workshop. So a huge thank you, and we look forward to the next one, if not starting to discuss CS edX and what workshops we might be talking about in November. Not, just to volunteer you already. But thank you, everybody. I'll stop the recording there. And I think, as Lorraine mentioned, you're welcome to hang around for a few minutes if you've got some other questions or comments and things as well. But recording is